updates, Emma? What have we...
We've had none before the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any declaration of interest?
Just the town council.
The town councillors. Noted. Emma, have there been any questions from members of the public?
None received, Chairman.
Councillor Williamson is included.
Yes, on declaration of interest, I am a member of the North West Farnham Residents Association. And as such, one of the applications has been discussed at the committee, but I had it minuted that I wasn't participating in that conversation.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Elizabeth Simmons, please. Any relevant updates, government guidance or legislation since our last meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, members, the government has issued 3 pieces of new guidance since your last meeting. Firstly, it has updated its Gypsy and Traveller planning policy. This includes several minor amendments, but importantly, this reinforces that local authorities should now very strictly, as opposed to just strictly, limit new traveller site development in open countryside, that is away from settlements. The definition of gypsy or traveller has been amended to require a clear alliance with a nomadic life, and the policy emphasises that subject to the best interests of a child, personal circumstances and unmet need are not likely to clearly outweigh harm to the greenbelt, i.e. would not amount to very special circumstances. Secondly, the NPPG government guidance has been updated in relation to unauthorised encampments to stress that an absence of authorised sites does not mean that a council cannot take action in relation to unauthorised sites. And thirdly, the government has issued a new planning policy statement, which is effectively an update to the NPPF, government planning policy, stating that intentional unauthorised development in the green belt can be a material consideration to be weighed into the assessment in addition to the existing tests of impact upon openness and inappropriateness. And this last point is really quite interesting because members will know that forever we've been advising you that you cannot give any weight to the fact that a development has already been undertaken and you have to assess retrospective applications and unauthorised development as if they weren't there and on their merits. But for this singular one particular point in planning law now, unauthorised development in the green belt, you can find it harmful and give weight against it, providing you can be satisfied that it carrying out of that development was intentional. And that will, as we go forward, we'll understand what that actually means in terms of decision making, because the understanding of that will come out through appeals and through the courts. So I hope that's helpful. You'll be relieved to know that none of the items on tonight's agenda are directly affected by these changes, and they are for members' information at this stage, and I hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Item 6, the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area, position statement on the current capacity. I think Paul's going to address this one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. You'll see the table is as of the 17th of September 2015. There is one correction to make to the table, in that the dwellings at appeal should actually read 6 and not 1. It's also worth noting that in recent weeks, the council has been dealing with quite a number of greenfield sites, and there are 2 schemes around the Farnham area at Lower Webburn Lane and at St George's Road. And when we come to update the report next time, that will hopefully account for the St George's Road permission, which is subject to an agreement, and also the Lower Webburn Lane site, which I understand has gone to appeal. That will depend very much on whether it's got a start date or not. So next time around, the table will start accounting for some of the larger schemes that have been before the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Suddenly, Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I wonder if I could ask a question. I was just flicking through some papers in the members' room before I came tonight, and it follows on what you were saying about sites at appeal. There are 25 sites allocated to Farnham, according to this paper, I know it's not necessarily set in stone, but it said 25 sites, and it doesn't take a great mathematician to work out we have 419 spaces. You've mentioned Lower Webburn Lane, which may go to appeal, that's 130 whatever. Yeah, 40, right. I always sort of look on the dark side. So what I'm really basically saying is, what's happening about SANGS? When are we going to get an update about, further update on SANGS? Because at the moment, we've only got the increased capacity because you've changed the formula, as you mentioned at the last meeting, to get more capacity in Farnham Park. But, that's only 419, 6 at appeal and whatever. We will need more, and I just wondered when we'd get an update on that.
Chairman, if I could pick that up. I don't know the exact answer to that, Councillor Coburn. As you're aware, for purposes of this meeting, we just report the existing capacity for purposes of members understanding that any decisions they make that are relevant to the SPA can be accommodated within the existing capacity. But I will take away your request for an update on that matter, and I will ask the Head of Planning if he can communicate the situation in terms of when an update on SANGS will be available to you. In due course. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Members, are you content to note the report? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, item 7, application for planning permission in the event of site inspections being necessary as a result of considerations. Site visits will be held on Tuesday the 27th of October at a time to be agreed. Moving on to the planning applications. Item A1, which is for public speaking, WA 2015-1497. Land at the end of the cul-de-sac, northwest side, 3 Styles Lane, Farnham, GU97DE. And Rachel to introduce this matter.
Thank you, Chairman. As you'll see on screen, the proposal relates to the erection of a dwelling and garage with associated works, and it is a revision of an earlier application, WA 2015-0386. You'll see on screen the location plan with the site outlined for you in red. It's at the far end of 3 Styles Road, adjacent to number 29. Here you'll see an aerial view of the site. You'll see it's currently an open site and is adjoined by residential development on the west. I've highlighted on this screen the key constraints which apply to the application site. Again, the site is highlighted in red. You'll see it falls just outside of the developed area boundary. This line in green here denotes the edge of the settlement boundary, with the site being just beyond it. The site falls within the AGLV and within the countryside beyond the green belt. The ASVI, Area of Strategic Visual Importance, lies to the south of the site. The site is covered in the Waverley's landscape report, produced for the purposes of the local plan. You'll see it forms part of Character Area 7. The site is highlighted in blue on screen to give you an idea of its scale. And I've got a quote on here from that landscape report. With its mainly rural character and setting, property pattern and designation, capacity for development in the segment as a whole is likely to be limited. There could be some potential in the area most closely related to the existing development to the south and west. You'll see from the position of the site that it is closely related to development on the western side. It is for members to consider the weight to be attached to this. Here we'll see the proposed block plan. Proposed is a single-storey bungalow on the site, together with a garage to the rear. You will note that the proposed dwelling is positioned 8 metres from the boundary with number 29. The proposed elevations for you on screen. You will see its height is around 5.1 metres, and its depth around 16.7. You'll note the proposed floor plan. It is for a 4-bedroom dwelling. And these are the proposed garage elevations. Here you'll see the proposed street scene. You will see it be adjacent to numbers 27 and number 29, both 2-storey dwellings. However, the proposed dwelling would be single-storey. On screen now is a comparison of the current proposal with the refused application, WA 2015-0386. You will see that it does have a larger footprint, the current proposal, than the refused application. A second point of comparison here, you will see from the elevations. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the refused application. That was a 2-storey dwelling. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the current proposal, a bungalow. You'll see it's been reduced considerably in terms of its height and bulk in comparison to that scheme. I also have a number of comparison measurements for you. This table was also available in the agenda report for you to refer to. In terms of the height, you've got a reduction from around 8 metres down to 5. But you do have an increase in the width and depth of the scheme. There is a small reduction in the distance to the boundary of number 29, and this should be balanced against the reduction in height. I'll take you through a few of the key site photographs. These photographs show you number 29, the nearest neighbour to the site. You will see they have some windows overlooking the site at present. On the left-hand side, you'll see the view from within that property, looking towards the application site. Here you can see the existing street scene. On the top, you'll see the application site is on the right-hand side. Here you'll see the application site. I'll now take members through the determining issues in relation to this application. The matters of principal and technical judgment are the boost to the housing land supply and the effect on the SPA. The matters of judgment are the planning history and the differences with the previous proposal, the impact on the character and beauty of the countryside beyond the greenbelt, the impact on the AGLV, design and visual amenity, and the impact on residential amenity. Officers have advised that there would be some impact on the open character of the countryside. However, the modest impact on the character of the countryside and the AGLV would not, in officers' view, outweigh the benefits of the proposal by way of adding to the housing land supply within the borough within a sustainable location. The differences with the previously refused scheme are, in officers' view, considered to be sufficient to overcome the previous reasons for refusal. If I could draw your attention now to the update sheet. You will note there have been 3 additional letters of objection which have been received. The agenda report is considered to be comprehensive in addressing those issues, although some further advice is offered on that update sheet. The applicant has yet to complete a signed legal agreement in respect of the SPA. The recommendation has therefore been amended in respect of the timescale for completion of that legal agreement. The revised recommendation is therefore that subject to the completion of an appropriate legal agreement in respect of the SPA by the 9th of October and subject to conditions 1 to 10 and informatives 1 to 5, that permission be granted. Recommendation B remains as set out in the agenda, that in the event that the requirements of Recommendation A are not met, that permission be refused. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rachel. Before we move on to public speaking, I'd like to ask Solicitor Erica to make some comments.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before we continue, on the 3rd of August this year, Mr. John Cressy sent an email to members regarding an application that was determined at the June committee. We just wanted to ensure that members had that letter and that you've had a chance to read it, or an email. And it had to do with this application that we're looking at that was previously refused. So we just wanted to bring that to members' attention. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Erica? Turn now to the public gallery and ask the objector, Mrs. Bell, to speak. You have 3 minutes from the time you start.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councillors and members of the Western Planning Committee. I'm here tonight, being the immediate neighbour, to voice my objections to the revised planning application for a bungalow on the grazing field at the end of Three Styles Road in Farnham. The narrow width of the field, in comparison with those of the bungalows on the opposite side of the road, has made it difficult for the applicant to obtain the required accommodation on a single floor, thus making it necessary to increase the overall footprint of the building by 22%. The bungalow has been repositioned some 3 metres closer to our boundary, and the flank wall, which will block light and amenity from our kitchen and patio area, has doubled in length to 16.7 metres. There would remain clear views to our first floor family bathroom and landing from the front car parking of the bungalow, thus totally sacrificing our privacy. The design put forward is of little architectural merit and is not in keeping with the character of other properties in the road, and has been made merely as a tool to obtain a permission to develop. It does nothing to enhance the street scene and is not in keeping with the existing two-storey houses on the northwest side of Three Styles Road. Under normal permitted development rights, there would be little to stop a further application to add a second floor, which would result in a house of much greater scale, mass and bulk than that previously refused, and for which an appeal has been launched. The field is situated in country beyond the green belt and within an area of great landscape value, outside of any defined settlement, and is therefore inappropriate for development. Not only this, but the site of the proposal is situated at the pinnacle of a hill in full view of South Farnham and 100 metres from nearby public footpaths leading down to the UCA. There was no landscape report attached to the application, which would have identified the material harm that would be caused to the AGLV. The repositioning of the bungalow has not mitigated any detrimental effect on the surrounding countryside, neither has it enhanced it, therefore being inconsistent with policy C2 and C3 of the Waverley Borough Plan of 2002. As each case is considered on its own merit, there can be no principle for development. The officer's report suggests that the test is for members having regard to changes in design, has overcome the objections previously refused scheme and is acceptable in its own right. We do not agree this has been achieved. There is no sound reason to ignore the Waverley Borough local plan, nor the view of Farnham Town Council, nor not to mention the 75 local residents who took the time to write to the council with their valid objections. We feel this application must without question be refused.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Now move on to the supporter, Mr. Leedale. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. Your officers have undertaken a thorough appraisal of this application in the light of relevant planning policies and the various submissions which have been made. They recommend the grant of permission. This application is a response to the refusal of a previous application, which was for a two-storey dwelling. What we have done is to design a bungalow so as to address the concerns of the single affected neighbour and perceived harm on the AGLV. It is agreed by the committee and officers that this is a sustainable development. You are given recent case law in the report, and policy C2 is not applicable as to the principle of development. As a result, the committee must find significant or demonstrable harm if it is to decline permission for the proposal. In assessing significant or demonstrable harm, it is shown that there would be very limited public views to the proposed development. The fact is that aside from views on this part of Three Styles Road, there is a single point some 300 metres away where a dwelling on this site might be seen. From here it sits amongst other houses. However, we understand the committee's concerns with the previous proposal. By reducing the bulk, mass and scale to a bungalow, it would obviously have very much less visual effect than the two-storey house. On the matter of perceived harm to the single affected property, it was said that the siting and scale would lead to a loss of amenity to the adjoining resident. It is clear that the proposed bungalow form would be less bulky, and it remains over 12 metres from the picture window, which serves a dining room and galleried landing. This window is glazed with darkened glass so that views into it are obscured. In hours of nightfall, and assuming the lights are on, it is open to the applicant to have blinds fitted to the window. A specialist who has seen the interior of the house has confirmed that this is possible. The suggestion that there would be a loss of light is not founded, and your officers have specifically dealt with this matter in response to the objector's report. Finally, I wanted to refer to the number of objections. Many of these are duplicated from the same address or the same person. I accept that it is within the gift of any party to make such objections. However, the weight to be afforded to these must be reflective of the material effect on the author of the particular letter. Aside from the large number of letters from the immediately adjoining resident, the remaining objectors are from parties which could not conceivably be directly affected by the construction of a single dwelling on this land. Indeed, one of them is from a person who lives in Sheffield. Many of these objections are based on the principle of development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Liddell. Members, it's your turn. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. As it's been said on a number of occasions, we rejected this application, an application for this site already. And I've studied the papers in great detail, and I'm struggling to see how it's changed that much. It's still located in the countryside, and it's outside the town's boundary. This encroachment conflicts with both Waverley's local plan and the MPPF. The site still lies within an area of great landscape value, AGLV, which we as a council should at least be trying to protect rather than destroy. Again, we have the support of both national and local policies. It's on the brow of a hill, on the top of a hill, and would be clearly visible from the ASVI, the area of strategic visual importance, which is about, I think it's about 100 yards. I don't work in metres. I think it's about 100 yards away. Again, we have national and local policy to encourage the enhancement of surrounding landscape, let alone just trying to conserve it. Again, I think this development will have a significant effect on the amenity value of number 29. Despite the height being reduced, the footprint is now significantly larger, and it's been positioned closer to the boundary with 29. I've heard nothing or seen nothing in the report to encourage me at all to change my mind from the original position, and I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Blagden.
I'd like to second that opinion, because in fact what we also have been worried about is the creeping, the incremental increase in the number of houses in Three Styles Road. And every time that another house goes in, and the last one I think was probably about a year ago, I'm speaking without a brief on this, but they said this is going to be the last house in this particular row. And the next thing we know is bingo, comes the next house. And this means that any developer will say, that's all right, we know it's meant to be the last house, but we can add yet another one or two. So we really, if we say this is going to be the last house, last time, that is how we should see it, and not carry out any further incremental development to encourage other incremental development in other areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hargreaves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with both my colleagues, so I'm not going to repeat everything they said, but I would say that I can't believe they want to put a bungalow there, because it makes the situation even worse. It is totally out of keeping with the rest of the road. So it would have been better for the two-storey house, but the bungalow is far, far worse. And equally, I am concerned, should we ever let any form of a development go there, then it would creep forward. And before we know, we get rid of the complete green area between Three Styles Road and I think it's Old Park Lane. So I will not be supporting this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask a question, if nobody else wishes to speak? Can you just go back to the landscape thing? Because this is, I think, the crux of this. And I interpret that as west, as being over on right on the west-hand side, not the bit of Three Styles Road, you know, when you mentioned south and west. And what I really want to know is, as a result of this, we've got the designations which we know are slightly out of date, £5 to the Mayor's charity, whoever that is. You know, I just really want to know how strongly, because there's a feeling locally, and I support it, that, you know, this landscape report was important at a time of great pressure to determine where we have the green spaces as well as where we have the development, and I thought that was the whole point of this study. So looking across it, I can see exactly where you've highlighted this. I mean, I would not interpret this bit as being to the west of it. I just, as a point, just want clarification on that. But I just wondered again what the strength of this is as evidence that this is a special area that we should be protecting, as far as we know, ASVI and AGLB are losing their weight. So I just really want some clarification, please, on the importance of this.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, the officers wish to respond?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the question. It is a material consideration for members to consider, and really it's up to you that the weight that you want to give to it.
Thank you.
Just go back.
Please.
No, thank you. What I was appreciate that. What I was really wondering was, you know, how much weight is there behind it? That's really what I'm trying to suggest. In the past, we knew exactly what weight was attached to AGLV and ASVI. We're in changed times, but there is a feeling in this area that this swathe of green, which goes from the top of the hop fields across, should form part of a strategic part of green space. And that's what I want to know is, you know, can we defend this sort of area on this as our evidence for the new local plan, or are we just right back to the MPPF and we haven't got anything else to as evidence, as it were?
Chairman, if I could pick that up. I think the answer to that, Councillor Coburn, is you can give some weight to it, but only limited weight at this stage, and until these designations are given formal status in any reviewed local plan or neighbourhood plan, then you cannot give it the full weight that a local plan, adopted local plan policy would be given. But I think it's, as Rachel has said, I think it's acceptable for you to give it some weight and decide how much weight you want to give it, although our advice would be that should only be limited at this stage. Nevertheless, the existing local plan remains the development plan, and you're quite right in concluding that it does designate it as countryside beyond the green belt and AGLV, and that still remains a material consideration, albeit the countryside policy does not prevent development in principle, as we've explained in the report and we explained to you last time at this meeting. The considerations are largely around, is this in a sustainable location, and would the development critically harm the character of the landscape and the character of the countryside? And I think in the debate last time we got to the point whereby your views were focused on those considerations, and they are the correct considerations for this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I see no one else wishing to speak. There are two recommendations. Recommendation A is that, subject to the completion of an appropriate legal agreement in respect to the SPA by the 9th of October 2015, and subject to the conditions 1 to 10 and informatives 1 to 5 as set out on pages 27 to 31 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour of the recommendation to grant?
That's none.
Those against?
That's 11.
Abstentions?
1.
Thank you. And therefore, sorry.
Who abstains?
Yeah, no, unusual. May I have the alternative recommendation, please? Proposer and seconder and reasons. Councillor Story.
Well, I'm willing to propose that this application is refused, and would cite the grounds as they were in the previous application. I don't see that this application has ameliorated the reasons for refusal, and so we should regard them as the same reasons.
Thank Councillor Blagden, second.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Sims.
Chairman, if I could just say, for transparency, perhaps we could draw members' attention to page 15 of the agenda, and for anyone else reading the report, or for people watching the webcast, it is on our website and those reasons are set out there in full. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I was actually looking at page 15 when Elizabeth spoke. No, don't worry. So, because I don't think I think 1 and 2 are exactly spot on. I don't think anything's changed. But I do think that what we said about the siting and scale, I'm not sure is quite accurate for this refusal. It's the impact on the countryside remains the same, but I think there has been a movement towards lessening the impact on 29 by lowering the height, and I think we should recognise that. It still, I think, affects the neighbour's amenity, but I just don't think we should use exactly the same words.
Elizabeth, did you want to come back on that?
Chairman, can I suggest then, if members are happy with the scale, bulk and mass, but are still unhappy with the siting, that for reason for refusal 3, you take out scale, and just leaving siting. If that, sorry.
Sorry, just to add on to what Elizabeth's saying, for the first reason, if you're not concerned any longer about the bulk of it, then we can always delete the words bulk and mass and just leave siting. So that's just the application site itself, the house being on the site. And the same applies to number 3. If scale isn't much of an issue anymore and it's just a siting or the principle of something being there, then we could just refer to siting and the rest of the wording, which looks at outlook, privacy, etc.
Thank you, Eric. Councillor Pritchard, Councillor Fraser, and then Councillor Coburn.
I do have a slight disagreement with that. I do have a problem with the scale of it because the floor plan's far too big. So I think the scale and bulk is still, and mass is still relevant.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
I would endorse that, Mr. Chairman. The height has been reduced, agreed, but it's 3 metres closer to the neighbour and the wall is much longer. So the perceived mass will be equally injurious.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Yes, I mean, what I'm trying to do is make a bespoke response to this particular application, and I agree in terms of the impact on the countryside that there will be a large an impact, wide as an impact because of the sheer footprint of this one. But I do feel that we have to be careful when we're talking about overbearing form and one or two of these other phrases that we used because of the two-storey house. I accept that this one's closer and I accept it's going to have an effect. I just think we should choose our words carefully for this because it is a bungalow, it is lower. I think, as I say, it will have a harmful impact in the countryside because of its scale width-ways, so I don't think that's any different. But I do think we perhaps ought to just modify the wording in number 3.
Councillor Pritchard.
I think that's a very good point, Deputy Chair, and I think that perhaps then I would propose in number 3 that we remove overbearing form and loss of light to number 29 as regards to the fact that it's now a single storey.
Councillor Story, do you accept that amendment?
I think that's fine, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have no further speakers. Councillor Story proposes and Councillor Blagden seconds that this application is refused for the conditions that we have just stated. Can I have those in favour of refusal? Oh, sorry. Before that, can I ask Rachel to come in? I do apologise.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll note the original recommendation B, which includes a reason for refusal in respect of the SPA. If we're determining this application tonight, I would suggest this is a further reason for refusal, as the legal agreement has not been completed. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Story?
Absolutely right, yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I have those in favour of the recommendation to refuse?
That's 11.
Okay, and again, I will abstain because I was sidetracked a little bit by some procedural matter earlier on, and I really didn't pay full attention to the officer's report. I apologise to her and to you members. So, unusually, I abstained. I don't normally do that. Thank you very much. Moving on to item A2, WA 2015-1454. The applicant has submitted an amended plan in respect of this application site. This seeks to amend the access arrangements to remain as existing in respect of item A2. The amendment represents a material change to the scheme. In the interests of transparency and the level of public interest in the site, officers consider it necessary to reconsult on the amended plan, and therefore officers are recommending the application be deferred. The agent has agreed to this approach. Yes.
I don't know. No, it was just for clarification for those of you who didn't go on the site visit or whatever. We actually asked on the site visit. Those of you who know that this application well know was that the Heritage Officer didn't like the proposal using the Ford Lane entrance because of the changes to the listed wall and the displays. So we asked on the site visit if we went back to the original entrance, and we had Surrey Highways there to ask as well, would Surrey Highways have a big objection to that? And the answer was no, they wouldn't. They were quite prepared to accept that. But unfortunately, we discussed on site, or Paul advised us on site, that were we to look at using the shared site, using that existing access, then it would have to go back to for further consultation. So that is why we're here. We all wanted to get this one done, but it is such an important site. And so that's why, I'm quite pleased in some ways that the applicant's going back. I know it's not something any of us really wanted, but I just think it's so important that we get this one right. And if we need further consultation, so that's really the history behind it, for those of you who weren't on the site visit.
Members, I put it to you that we defer this item. Is that agreed? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on now to item A3, WA 2015-1456, land to the rear of Herring Court, 39 Ford Lane, Recklesham. Rachel, would you like to introduce the application?
And do I leave it now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Councillor Coburn.
Right, sorry about this. As I say, I really don't want to delay this, but I can't see the point of looking at the Waverley Lane access until we've ascertained whether the Ford Lane access. Now, I know they're two totally separate applications, but it is the same house and different accesses. And I don't want to break any legal rules, so if we can't just defer this application, and have to determine it, then so be it. But to me, as it is such an important application and it is the same site, it would make much more sense to come back and look at the two separate applications, having had the consultation on the shared drive through the existing access. So that's what I'm asking, whether that's possible.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer your question, Councillor Coburn, that's fine.
Fine, members. I turn to you. Is that agreed that we defer both items to our next meeting? Thank you very much indeed. Where are we now? B1. Yes. Yeah. We continue then with item B1, WA 2015-1280, land to the rear of Viners Mead, Recklesham Road. Tim, would you like to introduce the report? Perhaps we'll just wait for the gallery to empty. Carry on, Tim, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Remember, starting off with the site location, the site is located within the Recklesham area of Farnham. It is located to the east of Recklesham Hill. Access to the site is via an existing access point off Recklesham Hill here to the west. And the proposal is for 3 residential dwellings at the back of the site here. The site surroundings consist of largely residential. There is a commercial yard further to the south here. Viners Mead, the application site forms part of the garden grounds to Viners Mead, which is the Grade 2 listed building, which is here. This is an aerial photograph of the site. You can see outlined here in red. You can see here the Viners Mead, the existing property. To the south, the commercial yard. To the north, more modern residential development. And to the east, 1970s residential development. So the proposal is for the erection of three-bedroom dwellings in the form of a terrace. Access would be remaining in the same position off Ruckersham Hill. The access point would be widened, however, from 4 metres to 6.8 metres. This would allow a passing point on the access point for 2 cars. A new driveway would be formed leading up towards the rear of the site. This also includes the erection of a new boundary wall which would seal off the garden to be retained for Viners Mead. The proposal includes also the demolition of existing garage which is currently here to allow for the access. The proposed 3 dwellings would be positioned here on site. There is also proposed private garden space for each of the 3 dwellings. Also bin and bike stores, and also 3 parking spaces for each dwelling. What is also shown on this plan, although not technically part of this application, is a garage and some parking spaces in front, which is subject to a previous permission, which hasn't been implemented yet, which is the parking to serve the existing dwelling Viners Mead. Members will note that this garaging is actually conditioned in the recommendation, one of the conditions, so that should permission be granted, this must be implemented. In terms of the dwellings themselves, this is the proposed front elevation. It does take the form of a simple row of 3 terraces. In terms of materials, the roof would be clay tile roof with clay tile hanging, clay tile open front porches, wooden windows, and open exposed facing brickwork on ground floor. Chimneys are also proposed for each dwelling. The rear would have an outshot in the centre to allow for the depth, which along the rear would be flush with all 3 dwellings. This is the side elevations for the dwellings, again mirroring each other there. Proposed ground floor plan, each dwelling would have the same level of accommodation, kitchen and 1 reception area at the back. And at first floor, 3 bedrooms, mirroring each other there. And this is the proposed roof plan. This roof structure is at the back of the property, and that was the outshot I referred to earlier. And there's some details submitted in terms of the windows and eaves detailing. The windows would be timber casement windows and would include some brick arch details above. The eaves would be exposed and the rafters in view to help with the design. There's some details of the proposed cycle stores and bin store. The cycle stores themselves would be small brick and tile structure, and the bin stores for each dwelling would be wooden. Members will note that we've attached to as an appendix the previous appeal decision on the site. What I have done here for you, you do have the outline of the site plan under the dismissed scheme in your agenda, but what I've done here is also shown you this comparison between the front elevations of the previously dismissed scheme and the current scheme down here. It should be noted in the inspector's report, he did pick up on particularly the detailing of the dismissed scheme, and in particular the windows. Seeking to address that, the applicants have sought some changes here, notably the chimneys becoming more symmetrical, exposing the eaves, the width of the terraces has been reduced, and the windows have been reduced as well. In terms of the actual comparisons, they are on pages 103 to 104 of your agenda, which I do summarise the some key aspects of the inspector's decision, which is material consideration. Just running through some site photographs now. You'll note here that the access at the moment is for the single dwelling known as Viners Mead. What is proposed is to remove these pillars and this section of wall here and railings to create a wider access point. This is to allow a passing point for two vehicles as they enter the site. This is the existing garage and part of the wall here, which would be removed to allow for the new access drive to the back of the site. From here onwards, a new wall would be erected further down along the site, enclosing the rear garden for Viners Mead. This is the view of the rear of Viners Mead, which is here. This is a view standing within the site, looking northwest. What, members, you can see here is the rear of some of the properties at Ellerton Way. The proposed front elevations of the terracing would run along here in this position, facing west. And again here, showing the north boundary wall, the rear of 9 to 10 Ellerton Way. And the view further southeast within the site. Members, it should be noted that the green shrubbery here and low-lying trees would be removed. However, more mature trees around the boundary of the site would be retained. In terms of the determining issues under this application, members, there is a recent appeal decision on the site, which is a material consideration. Officers have drawn your attention to that within the report. Officers are satisfied that the principle for some residential development in this location has been accepted by the inspector. Having regard to the visual impact and the distance to the heritage assets and residential amenity, officers are satisfied that the proposal has satisfactorily addressed the previous concerns from not only officers but also the inspector. So, Chairman, my recommendation is recommendation A, which is to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Members, it's all yours. Councillor Coburn.
I'd like to make 2 points, actually. One is I'm slightly sorry that we're doing this site in isolation, but that doesn't mean it's going to colour my judgment, but I would like to see the whole of that site that previously came in, you know, with the scrap metal, because I just feel it's such a good opportunity. But I have to say, I think I've just fallen in love for the first time with an inspector, because following on from 39 Ford Lane, you've got his turning down the previous application on the setting of the heritage assets. He just felt that the previous application didn't do justice to Viners Mead and some of the other properties, presumably in the conservation area. And I think the Recklesham Conservation Area is one of the most interesting conservation areas we have, because it is so mixed. You know, it has mixed properties, mixed sizes, it has industry. It's a very different conservation area in many ways. We treasure them all for different reasons. But I think, you know, looking at this, and looking at the existing, I'm pleased they're putting in this garage at last, and it's going to be in keeping as well. I think this is a good use of this particular site, given that's all we've got to look at tonight. And I think the changes to the terrace do overcome the inspector's previous concerns about that terrace. But I'm just so pleased that that's what he turned it down on, you know, because, as I say, that's the main issue at 39 Ford Lane that we've got to look at. These heritage assets, if we do treasure them, we have to protect the setting as well as the building. So I think this is a good use of that land. Pity it's not bigger, I mean the site, but I'll have to learn to live with that.
I think I see nothing else out there, so members, there are two recommendations. Recommendation A is that, subject to the receipt of a signed legal agreement within 3 months of the committee meeting in respect of the SPA, and subject to conditions 1 to 18 and informatives 1 to 8, is set out on pages 116 to 124 of the report, permission be granted. May I have those in favour, please show?
That's unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. The recommendation to grant is agreed. Recommendation B is that in the event that the requirements of recommendation A are not met, that permission be refused for the reason 1 as set out on pages 1 to 4 of the report. May I have those in favour of that recommendation?
Yeah, that's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we all depart, just like I made a mistake earlier on, I should have reported that we had at our last meeting, Brethren's meeting hall was put forward with 2 weeks to complete a legal agreement. They didn't meet the date. I think the mistake, or the, not mistake, on both sides they failed to complete on time. And the Vice Chairman and I were asked for our approval to give another 2 weeks to that extension. They didn't quite meet that. They had another 2 days. But we granted both those, and I believe it's all complete now. So I just wanted to record that. Sorry I didn't make it earlier, Rachel. Erica, do you want to add anything? No? Okay, that's it. Thank you all very much indeed.